I love Thanksgiving. Though I'm not a huge fan of turkey, it is the one holiday that we can all celebrate together, regardless of where you come from, how you pray, what your political beliefs are. We can come together and have a nice, big, happy family dinner. Or can we? As much as we would all love to have the big, happy family that gets along and loves each other, we know that for many families, this is not always the case. In fact, large family gatherings can often be fraught with tension, as disagreements, grudges, and even deception can mar our special events. This is so common that in recent years, there's a plethora of articles about how to survive the holidays. How did it get this bad? When did it get this bad? And more importantly, how do we find our way back to the good old days? How far back do we need to go to find a time when family loved each other, looked out for one another, and did right by one another? Surely, if we look at our biblical ancestors, we will find some good role models of family love and care. They are our revered forefathers and foremothers, after all. So let's start at the beginning. Adam and Eve. God's self created them. They must be great role models. Until they immediately do exactly what they were told not to do. How about Cain and Abel? Nope. They are the first example of fratricide. Surely Abraham will provide us with a good model. After all, he's the father of monotheism, of Judaism. Except that he agrees to send away one son with nothing more than a satchel of food and a skein of water, and then immediately after agrees to sacrifice his other favorite son. Okay, let's try Isaac. Surely after his ordeal of almost being sacrificed, he must try to be the best father and husband that he could be. Except that he favors Jacob over Esau to the point where Jacob has to flee for fear that Esau will kill him. And when Jacob himself becomes a father, he, having learned nothing from his own experience, favors Joseph to the point that Joseph's brothers sell him into slavery and tell his father that he has been killed. Wherever we look, from Moses to King David, each of our ancestral leaders had deep character flaws that led them to make poor decisions from time to time. So maybe we don't want to look at them as an example of how to treat our family. In fact, when looking at them, the disagreements or drama at our own family tables may seem minor in comparison. Looking at these stories could even lead us to question why we hold these people up as our esteemed ancestors. Wouldn't it be better to have perfect models that we could point to and say, I'm going to try and be just like them? But apparently the Bible doesn't think so, and I'm apt to agree. The models presented to us in the Bible are real, multifaceted beings that we can relate to. While they all have many good qualities, they also play favorites, lie, cheat, steal, and even murder. In fact, they are perfectly imperfect people who try their best, but sometimes come up short. While many of the decisions our ancestors made were made with good intentions, sometimes they too gave in to their weaknesses. And who here among us hasn't done the same? By seeing models that have weaknesses and imperfections, that look and act more like we do, we can hopefully be more willing to accept those traits in ourselves and in those around us. If the Bible were to present us with ancestors that were perfect and never erred, then they would present a model for us that we could never hope to achieve. If we expect perfection, then as soon as you slip up once, all is lost. For example, if you have the goal of working out every day and you miss one day, you've fallen short. Rather, if your goal is 5 days a week, there's room built in for imperfection. And implicit in the definition of imperfection is the recognition that we will fall short. If you look closely at these stories, there's another, more important theme running through them. In each case, we see God choosing to continue to love and stay connected to our biblical ancestors. even when their imperfections shine through. As our ultimate creator, parent, and teacher, God understands that perfection is an unattainable goal and that flaws are part of our human experience. By reading these stories, we learn that we don't have to be perfect to be loved. Abraham clearly wasn't perfect, yet God showed him favor time and time again. Isaac misses the mark in parenting his own children, and yet we are told that he had both God and Abraham's love. In each of these generations, God could have decided that the mistakes made were too serious to ignore and cut off the relationship with us. But instead, God chooses to teach us that flaws are part of who we are. What a relief these stories can be. If God is willing to love our ancestors, flaws and all, then surely God is willing to love us as well. And if we are indeed created B'Tselem Elohim in the image of God, then our job must be to emulate God in God's willingness to love imperfect beings. So instead of being turned off by someone's flaws, we should instead celebrate their successes. Our job is to remember that just as God lifts up the fallen, so too should we lift up those who stumble. And just as God doesn't expect perfection from us, so too must we be compassionate and expect and accept human flaws in those around us. So back to that big, happy family gathering that isn't always so happy. Maybe, just maybe, this is exactly what God intended when God created us as imperfect beings. Rather than create perfect beings who love one another perfectly, God chose to create imperfect beings who need to learn to love one another through our imperfections. But as we learn to love our big, happy, imperfect families, we are indeed following in the illustrious footsteps of our ancestors and of God, who love one another, flaws and all. Shabbat Shalom.